Welcome to the loading bench. In this video we're going to take on quite an ambitious little project. We're going to try and develop two 12-bore subsonic loads. Generally speaking, 1050 feet per second is the threshold, above which is supersonic, below which is subsonic. So we're going to try and make these loads in two different types. High tensile bismuth in one and TSS or tungsten supershot in the other. 70mm cheddite case or 70mm 2 3/4 inch cheddite case for both.
At this juncture, you might naturally ask, why don't you just go out and buy subsonic cartridges? Well, quick answer is they don't exist, unobtainable. A few of the suppliers, Ely and Lyleville to name two, make a subsonic cartridge, but they're all, and a few other suppliers do, they're all variations on the same thing. A 1 ounce clay load, a 1 ounce lead 7.5 load made for clay grounds, both for juniors and novices. They're designed to have low recoil and to be used in noise or more noise sensitive areas. There isn't a non-toxic subsonic cartridge out there, hence we have got to make it up as we go along.
So this is all the work I've done and research that I've got listed down so far in subsonics. In classic GCSE science mode, I've tried to just change one little variable at a time. So that quickly aggregates up into a heck of a lot of data. And the only way of remembering it all or to record it all in any meaningful way is a spreadsheet like this. So a lot of Longshot data that essentially didn't work. Longshot being the powder of choice for a lot of 12-bore loads, and it's absolutely fine. I use it in normal speed, TSS and steel and bismuth loads, but it doesn't seem to like the smaller charges at subsonic speeds. Yeah, I've had issues with it. It gives high degrees of variance. The powder doesn't burn properly. Literally, some loads just went pop, or in one case there were flames coming out the breech after I'd fired the shot when the powder was still burning. It hadn't combusted properly. All in all, Longshot was just not working, and it's very loud as well, which obviously in a normal load it should be renamed Cannon Shot, not Longshot. So all in all, for a subsonic load, that probably wasn't going to work too well anyway.
So I was poking about on internet forums, Facebook reloading groups, and a character on there with a wealth of experience of subsonic loads in both 12 and 20 bore put me on to another powder which he recommended for this kind of load, tightwad, which is designed for the lower end of the 12 bore spectrum for 1 ounce and 1 1/8 ounce loads up to speeds of 1200 feet per second. So with not much tweaking or reducing the powder charge, it's possible to get to subsonic speeds. You might also ask why I need a subsonic load anyway, and the reason for that is I have at least two marshes, estuaries that are quite small, surrounded by people, houses, livestock, horsey people. At least two of my landowners have campsites, caravan parks. Unhappy campers, not all of whom are going to agree with shooting or loud bangs early in the morning. Unhappy campers are not going to make happy landowners. Bird watchers come to look at these marshes. As a kind of repressed bird watcher myself, I can understand their views, and I totally understand people who don't agree with shooting or field sports. I don't go out of my way to cause conflict outside of community relations on a practical level. Because they're small estuaries, less noise means less disturbance to wildfowl, and probably more shots and more sport for me. So on a number of levels, finding an quiet and effective subsonic load that is still lethal has many advantages.
Here we go, 16 grains, and so on and so forth. So first off, we want the gas seal, which we've swapped out the nitro card for a gas seal. Standard gas seal, which these are available from Clay and Game. I've tried to use everything in terms of components that are commonly available over here, rather than reliant on American components which may be obsolete or will become obsolete. The only trouble with this tight wad powder is it's quite sticky. You've got to make sure it's all down at the bottom of the hull. I always like to get the gas wad with a number. I've got some unique numbers for some reason on the top side. Press that down, get it well seated. Then a 16mm fibre wad. Push that down. Then just to kind of bring the stack height up just to the right level, I use a cork spacer, nice and biodegradable. That goes in. Okay, now we're ready for the shot. So we want 1 ounce, which is 437 grains of this high tensile bismuth. It's a lot easier in weighing out than the powder pellets. Yeah, near enough. Yeah, 377. Okay. There's always one. We place that. 1 ounce. Now for the buffer. To buffer or not to buffer, that is the question. It seems more common in the States to buffer a load, which is to add a powder, either a synthetic powder or a eco version like this walnut shell powder, to bismuth loads to fill the little interstitial spaces between the pellets. So this is to bismuth's got a reputation for being brittle, and when the prime is detonated and the shot compresses and sets back, as it's called, it can squash against each other and shatter each other. So if you fill these spaces with a buffer, it kind of cushions them from that and reduces that happening. So the pellets leave the case and leave the gun in, you know, nice round form like you want, instead of a lot of fragmented parts that have broken each other apart.
So since I made this batch of cartridges, I've spoken to the importer of this bismuth, and he advises that it's not strictly necessary to buffer this type of shot. It's likely because it's an alloy with around about 5% tin added in. It's far less brittle than the old bismuth used to be, and so probably isn't quite so liable to shatter on setback. But anyway, we'll still test this buffered load, and at the end of this film we'll make an unbuffered load for comparison as well. I'll probably fire some test shots into a bullet catcher and see what the state of the shot's like.
Just a nice height, leaving us a nice enough room for the overshot card and crimp. Back to our cheap and cheerful Lee Loadall press. You can buy the base unit, and then from a supplier like Henry Crank in Leeds, you can get different caliber heads for it. The main head at the top, which you can change out. You can change these out in minutes. So this is a 12. I've got a 20 bore one as well. They supply a 16 bore version, so you can just buy this unit for an extra 30, and so you can use one unit and just interchange these for different calibers. So it makes a reasonable job when you combine it with a nice gape finishing tool on the drill. Good enough.
So on to the TSS load, or loads. We ended up making 2 1 ounce loads, both using tight wad powder from Hodgdon. The first, using 14.5 grains, I suspect is right around the threshold of subsonic, so I made a second load just with a slightly reduced powder charge of 14.2 grains. That's what we're making here, both using a 70mm Cheddite case, an LBC 43 wad, some felt packers, and a mylar wrap to go inside the wad. Use that on all the tungsten loads just for extra safety. First off, 14.2 grains of the powder. Give that a tap, avoid it sticking to the side of the hull. Next off, these wads come unslit, so we've got to slit them to most of the way down to a certain depth using a razor blade. You can buy all manner of fancy tools for slitting wads, but I just use a bracket made from a 3D printer, so this stops the razor blade at a given depth, and you get 4 even petals and wads split to the same depth every time. Easy peasy. I'm not mass producing these loads, so you don't need anything more convoluted than that. So that's the wad split into 4 petals. Now we put the pre-cut mylar wrap in it. Quickly get good at cutting these to the right length and the right depth, etc. And now you put 4 1/4 ounce 20 gauge felt wads, which fit nicely inside a 12 gauge wad. Pack that down into the hull, get it nicely seated, and that just leaves a nice amount of headroom for the crimp and just enough room inside the wad, which you don't actually need much room for 1 ounce of TSS because it being so heavy and dense. This is number 8, but I think probably on the next batch I make I'll probably drop down to a 7 or maybe even a 6 just to compensate for the lack of speed, with a slightly larger pellet just to kind of keep the kinetic energy. I'm thinking more about geese at subsonic speeds and ranges, just to essentially make sure that it'll have enough stopping power for the larger waterfowl species. It'll be fine for ducks. So yeah, probably not quite enough felt just to bring the tungsten up to the top of the wad, so I just added a 1/8 felt there, and that's about right. You don't want loose shot inside the shell, you want everything to be fairly compact so it doesn't rattle, just to keep everything quite tight, keep the pressure up. Then the overshot card, and now again just time for the crimp. For some reason I find that tungsten loads just crimp an awful lot nicer and neater than bismuth for some reason. Maybe it's the extra packing that's in the case. It just gives it a wee bit of cushioning and it packs down and looks neater. Label up the case so we don't get the batches mixed up when we take them to the proof house. This is my homemade loading block, just a simple kitchen chopping block. You get a Forstner 24mm bit, and it's another good use for your pillar drill. Just mark out the grid pattern of holes and drill them out to a certain depth, and you've got a nice loading block to help you load the cartridges. So this is the second bismuth load. This is 1 1/8 ounces of bismuth number 3s. We drop the shot size down or up to a larger pellet, and we're not going to buffer this load, and just to make room for the larger charge we took out the cork spacer just to give it enough room so we could get 32 grams or 1 1/8 ounces of the bismuth in. Again, number 3s, just to trial. All these loads sound good in theory, but it'll be out in the field on wildfowl that will see how effective they are at the low speeds. So we've made up a batch of those. So we've got 5 of the heavy bismuth loads, 5 of the 1 ounce bismuth, and the 2 tungsten loads. So we've got 4 batches to go to the proof house for testing. Now, if there is a kind of a safer end of the spectrum for reloading, it probably is subsonics. Given that you're reducing the powder, you're likely to be reducing pressure, but that's not a totally safe assumption, because with using heavier loads at reduced charges, there is a chance that you could be increasing pressure. Again, another good reason to always take your loads to get tested. This is a good little device, a cheap-ass sealer from eBay, just to waterproof small batches of cartridges when you're going out in wet conditions on the salt marsh. This will keep your cartridges dry until you need to use them. So we sent off the 4 batches to Clay and Game, and while we were waiting for the results, we did some field testing. It's not just about the decibel or the noise reduction with the subsonics. The moderated guns seem to change the sound of the shot, in that they can produce, you want them to produce a fairly metallic whoosh noise that, to the average anti standing 2 miles away, who might think, God, those effing shooters again firing off shotguns, it hopefully changes their reaction to one of, what was that weird noise, which is good. It doesn't raise hackles unnecessarily, so that's the intention. So we tested them just dry firing through the chronograph at some pattern boards, just to see how they patterned, and then out in some real hunting situations. It was quite a pleasant bonus not to need ear protection. I do like to hear the ducks' wings and calls when they're coming in without having to wear amplified earphones. And also it's just nice on a still night not to let off a shot that sounds like an artillery shell going off, which wakes everybody within a 10-mile radius. That was a pleasant surprise. So anyway, the results coming back were a real pleasant surprise. In fact, I'm thrilled to bits actually. All 4 batches came under the subsonic limit, but only just, so we kept as much speed as possible without breaking that sonic barrier. Um, Quite a small amount of variance, very consistent loads, especially the 2 Bismuth loads, which was a bit of a surprise. They showed far less of a standard deviation than the two TSS loads, but all 4 batches really good. But again, a disclaimer: load these recipes at your own risk, and if you do use this load data information, load it exactly the way it's detailed in these sheets. You can pause the video on all 4 sheets to get the detailed information and the reports back from the test centre. And happy hunting and good luck out there. Please like and subscribe and leave comments, and if you like any specific loads made up, just leave feedback in the comments. Please, see you next time.